Welcome to your Tuesday Daily Delivery. I am Michael Rand. Plenty to get to today, and we'll get to a lot of it with Patrick Reusse here in just a little bit. Some great stuff with Patrick, talking about, a little bit of Wild, a little bit of Tom Thibodeau, and a whole lot of Dark Star. Today is the 9-year anniversary of Dark Star's passing. Some great stories from Patrick, good friend of his, and just an all-time character in Minnesota sports. So looking forward to that conversation with Patrick here in a little bit. But first, what did I miss? I want to frame this conversation with something we've talked about before here, but just some of our summer teams seem like they're starting to come around just a little bit, and I want to use that as a way to. I want to use their start to the year as a way to frame how we should expect the Wild to play next season, or at least what we should expect the potential problems to be for the Wild next year. I'm talking about the Twins, the Lynx, and Minnesota United. Twins maybe kind of sort of playing their way back into at least the road to 500, 22-31 now. Sure helps when you can play Baltimore a whole bunch like they have lately. Fourth straight win over Baltimore on Monday. Had to sweat it out a bit. Lots of people hurt right now, obviously. Look at their outfield. You got, Buxton out. Larnach now got something going on with his foot after getting hit by a pitch. Arraez out. Kepler out. That's a starting outfielder right there. Jake Cave's your fifth guy. He's out too. I think their starting outfield the other day was Kirilloff, Refsnyder, and Kyle Garlick. No offense to those guys, and I love the stories there. I love Refsnyder. In fact, I think Refsnyder will probably be on Wednesday's Daily Delivery, kind of telling his story, what this season's meant to him so far. But it's just weird things happen, I guess, is the message with the Twins, right? All these injuries, so many other things happen. You go into the season thinking, is this a World Series contender? And all of a sudden, so many things happen that goes out the window quickly. Minnesota United, whole bunch of new talented players come in, but it's a mix that they're still getting used to. They lose their first 4 matches of the season. Now, since then, there's been 2 wins. Then they got a gift draw against Real Salt Lake over the weekend when they got a late goal, kind of bounced in off a player after the keeper tried to punch it out. But they're not going great yet. But they've got time and they got their new players in. Minnesota Lynx, same thing. They finally won on Monday, first in 5 tries. Beat Connecticut Sun in overtime after a late rally. Otherwise, that was going to be 0-5. Another team with high expectations. So good for all those teams that they're starting to kind of figure things out after really rough starts. But I just want to use that as a way to frame the discussion quick about the Minnesota Wild. Their season ended last week on Friday. We kind of covered a lot of that ground in a post-game episode, a post-game 7 episode, special delivery we call it. If you missed that one, go back and check that out. Talk to Sarah McClellan about some future issues, things like that. But going into next season, there's going to be expectations for the Wild, obviously, based on the way this year played out. The message here is that even though they seem like they are on a trajectory upward, I worry that they will suffer the same fate where they will struggle, at least initially, not just based on expectations, but because seasons are weird. They are their own entities. We've seen it time and time again with our Minnesota teams where they have expectations based on one season, and they struggle the very next year. So that's what I'm going to be watching as this offseason unfolds, as we start to ramp up the narrative of what next season is supposed to be for the Wild. Can they really expect to duplicate what they just did, or is that going to be more of a challenge than we think? We tend to automatically assume because one thing happened, it will happen again, and history has proven that it's been just the opposite so many times. So that's what I want to watch for going forward with this team. Give them a chance to kind of decompress. Obviously, this was a successful season, but if our summer teams right now are any indication, it's going to be a long uphill climb next season for the Wild.
I'm Nyla Jean Myers, Senior Assistant Sports Editor at the Star Tribune. Thank you for listening to Strip Sports Daily Delivery. This work is made possible by our Star Tribune subscribers. For unlimited access to the articles mentioned in this podcast and our coverage of Minnesota sports from pros to preps, go to startribune.com/subscribe.
Tuesday on Daily Delivery. I almost said Monday because I'm used to having Patrick Reusse on Mondays. We didn't do a show yesterday, Memorial Day. Hope everybody had a good weekend. Patrick, you too. How you doing today?
Good, gorgeous. We got a gorgeous Memorial Day after all the people up at the lakes froze to death until Monday. But Monday turned out to be a nice day for the folks who do that. So we had to settle for a couple-hour drive in the convertible, but that was okay too. It was a beautiful day yesterday. So
yeah, it was about perfect. I think the weekend that people wanted was going to be next weekend. I think that was the next one's going to be hot and good lake weather. But yeah, it was Memorial Day itself was perfect outside. So not a day anybody wanted to be inside listening to a podcast anyway. So I'm glad we waited a day on that. Waiting a day doesn't make you probably any more optimistic, Patrick, about your New York Knicks. I'm going to start with the Knicks just because we haven't had it. Every time we think we're going to talk Tom Thibodeau, we kind of run out of time or something else happens. But down 3-1 in that series. What's your thoughts on what's happened so far?
My thoughts on it are how the hell did this guy go 41-31 with this collection? I mean, Julius Randle's had a great year, but the Hawks have decided, we're going to just double team him and we're not going to guard their center. Nerlens Noel or Taj Gibson or whoever the heck's playing center. They have no center. And I don't know how I think everybody in New York, they'd won, what was it, 38 and 130 or something the previous 2 years, 120 or something, whatever it was. And everybody expected them to be a non-playoff team and to have them, make the playoffs as the 4 seed. Everybody was in New York was happy and excited and had visions of grandeur as they do with the Knicks. But you see this team and you say, how did they do this? So, they're going to go down. They might manage to win a home game, but they can't beat the Hawks because, the Hawks aren't bad. They got that Trae Young who's fantastic. And then I was looking at their club and they're about 9 deep. They got guys on the bench like Herter and guys that can play. And it's a mismatch. And Tibbs got them to the playoffs, and everybody in New York was excited about that. But they have no chance to beat anybody. They're just, as you pointed out when we were talking earlier, Derrick Rose is. They played these point guards, Alfred Payton and Linka, these guys. But for the playoffs here, Rose has been playing 30-some minutes and taking all the shots. He's their only other weapon right now. And it's not good. The Knicks are going down the tank. But what the heck? He's going to still get the Coach of the Year award because remember, that's for the regular season, ladies and gentlemen. So
he probably deserves it, at least in the ring. I think the Phoenix coach is probably going to win the Coach of the Year award. But the playoffs too, though, that it's funny you mentioned just Derrick Rose, Taj Gibson. If there wasn't just one criticism of Tom Thibodeau when he was here, but if there's one consistent critique of him, and he's an excellent regular season coach, it's that he pushes the panic button at a certain point, and he's got his guys that he trusts, and he's going to go down with those guys no matter what, and that's where he's going right now with Taj Gibson and Derrick Rose. Not that they're not still good players, but Randall and RJ Barrett were kind of the 1-2 in the regular season, and now all of a sudden he's got Rose in the starting lineup, and it's got a different look to it.
Yeah, but the biggest thing is they're just, somebody was finally smart enough to just take Randall away from him and just make his life miserable with 2 good players. But it's I'm sure that they got to get some new talent in here, but. Who's probably discontented, don't you?
Gonna bring that up. Jimmy Butler, baby.
Jimmy Butler. And there's no chance if Jimmy Butler becomes available, he won't be with the Knicks. It's 100%, right?
Yeah, because that was an interesting thing. Throughout the whole Jimmy wants out story, you never quite got the sense that there was a problem with him and Thibodeau. It was more about the team than it was about Thibodeau, right?
More than anything, it was they didn't pay him when it came.
Yeah, right.
When push came to shove,
and they paid Wiggins.
They gave the money to Wiggins instead of him. That was That's what it was. And hey, yeah, Tibbs wasn't perfect here. I'll admit that.
No.
Paying Wiggins, drafting Chris Dunn instead of Jamal Murray, and when I know for a fact that his buddy Calipari called him up and said, "You got to draft this Murray. He's going to be really good." The one and doneer from Kentucky, but he wanted that toughness. He's still into that toughness idea, and that ship has kind of sailed in the NBA. There's no doubt about it. But they somehow this year he did get the Knicks to play defense, which did not happen here. I do think I have a lot of fun defending him, but I do think he was hired to get them to the playoffs, right?
Yeah, which you did.
It wasn't that you're going to win an NBA title. It was, we haven't made the playoffs for 12 years. You got to get us to the playoffs. And then he gets them to the playoffs. The next year, the Butler thing blows up. And then that was the end of the road. But I don't think I think he answered the mission that he was given, which was to get him back, to get him off they did win 47, right?
47 that year. Yeah.
Yeah. How did they win 47?
Jimmy Butler. That's how they did it.
Yeah.
And Cat.
And they would have won more because Butler missed 20 games or something with a bad knee. So
yeah,
I don't know. He can still coach. He looks a little better. He's lost a little weight. Don't you think? He's a little skinny.
Yep. He looks like he's
he's not a male model, but
he's never going to be a male model.
He looks a little better, but it'll be interesting to see if he, the New York tabloids can turn on a guy in a heartbeat. So let's, if the season becomes a failure because they get taken out by 5 by the Hawks, it'll be interesting to see if they turn on him or not. That'll be interesting.
I like how you bring up Jimmy though. He's got the Heat got swept quick by the Bucks, and then something just looks wrong there. There was the rumors or the reports that he and Spoelstra had a blow up about 6 weeks ago, and his contract I think is next season, but then player option after that. So that's the time that guys get traded. That's the time the guys get traded. That'd be his 5th team since 2017.
Yeah, after pretty well being stuck. But he's 32 now, too, or something like that.
Yeah, 31, I'll look that up. Somewhere in the early 30s, I think.
Yeah, so I mean, it's not like he's been banged up enough in the way he plays. It's not like you're going to have a star for 5 years. But Tibbs, Gary, today's Tuesday. He's worried about Wednesday.
Yes,
he's not worried about anything beyond that. He's worried about Wednesday. So I had hope after they won game 2, but man, they just got taken apart down in Atlanta. So they're not going to make her. They're not going to make her.
Yeah,
I was real hopeful for these NBA playoffs to not be as predictable as they've been in the past. But I mean, we got some good stuff going on out west, but the East, man, are just all blowouts. So.
Yeah, we'll see if the Sixers can keep it going because looks like Embiid's going to get an MRI on that knee. He came out of that game the other night.
That isn't good. Is he going to be the MVP or is it?
No, I think it's going to be Jokic. I think.
Jokic. Yeah.
If you want to know who's going to win all these awards, just look at the betting markets. That's where I think Jokic is like minus 6,000 right now. So I think who's
really?
Yeah.
Wow. That's something.
Butler 32 years old, by the way, or 32 in September. 32 in September.
Oh yeah, he'll be a Knick, no doubt about it. I don't know what you got to give up for him, although they don't have much. But beyond keeping Julius Randle, who you worried about? Right,
exactly. Yeah. Well, speaking of a team that overachieved during the regular season and then had a decent showing in the playoffs, I guess, but couldn't get it done. The Wild. We're talking before the segment started. I don't know how they would have fared against Colorado. Maybe it's just as well they didn't make it, huh, Patrick?
All right, Sid. Thank you. That's still my favorite Sid of all time. Well, one of them, not the favorite. I mean, there's 100 favorites, but the the favorite of all time was when it turned out we were lucky to lose to Atlanta in that NFC title game because we had so many injuries we couldn't have competed in the Super Bowl. Anyway, the greatest disappointment in Minnesota sports history. Sid told us, I got to find the actual clip, but I remember him talking about it on the radio too, that we were lucky we lost because we had so many injuries we couldn't have. The way Sid made it sound, we weren't even going to go to Miami for the Super Bowl. We had so many injuries against that Atlanta team. We need Sid right now to tell us the Wild were lucky they got beat because they had so many injuries. So I think they're doing some zooming today, right?
Yes,
the Wild,
that is correct.
Tell us what happened to Brodeen and stuff like that. We don't know yet, right?
Yeah, Act 2 seems like he was pretty hurt too.
Yeah. So, well, we're lucky they got beat. But I think the NHL does not give teams a chance. Really. I mean, Vegas goes through the 7-game series and they got to be playing a day and a half later.
Right.
You got to give them 2 days off, don't you? And
yeah, you'd think
they play on the third day. I mean, God almighty, they have Colorado's sitting around waiting for a week, and they go out and beat you 7-2 or whatever it was. I mean, they do that all the time, though. I'm looking up 2003. I'd forgotten that both 7th games that time, and we talked about this last week, were played the next night.
Yeah, it was amazing.
And you were going to Denver one time and Vancouver the next.
Yeah, it was amazing.
Denver isn't so bad, but it is. What's the hurry? Take another. You're playing until July anyway. What's the hurry? I don't get it. So
yeah, that gives you a chance to I was just thinking the other good playoff line you can use is we took a lot out of them. Vegas, we do that. We took a lot out of them. Vegas they got all they could handle from us.
Yeah, that's you can spin it that way. That's for sure. You can spin it a lot of ways, but I don't. They got. I think people are. I hear people saying. I had some guy tweet me and say, "This is the most optimistic I've been about the Wild in decades." Well, they've only had 2 decades. Okay, this is not like you can't count the North Stars. Okay,
no,
and the other thing is, 2015, they won a playoff series, and they had Brodeen was 20, and Coyle and Granlund and Niederreiter and Dumbo were all 22 or younger. Weren't you optimistic then? You know what I'm saying is they didn't turn out to be what you wanted them to be, but I would think that 2015 and Parisi and Suter were both young.
Yeah,
we're both young. Weren't you optimistic then? Come on.
Yeah, you should have been, because that was kind of at the beginning too. That was before we got too disappointed, and there was a series in there too. I can't remember exactly who they played, but there was the one year where they advanced, and then the next series was close. Like it was 2-2.
I think that was 15, right? They won. They beat, and then because in 14 they beat Colorado in 7 games, and then they got swept by the Blackhawks, right? I think
that's right. Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
One of those years they got swept the next round. I can't remember if that was the Dubnyk year or if it was the year that they had the concoction of goalies that included Brzgalov, but one of those years they actually had. There was like a game 6 where it was really close too. So it was but the larger points probably okay. We forget how optimistic we probably were about those teams 6-7 years ago.
Right.
But they got a decent run up right now. They're gonna have a hard time. They're gonna have a hard time duplicating this next year, though. I think.
Yes, and is Talbot? Talbot was their goaltending was outstanding.
Yes,
and goaltending is like the Twins bullpen, right? The Twins bullpen last year was outstanding. It was only 6 games. This year, it's a bunch of flamethrowers, right? And flamethrowers in a bad way, like burning down the jungle type third,
Right.
I mean, this Hansel Robles would give me a Hansel and Regrettable. I call those two guys, Robles and Colomay. and they're terrible. And unless you're the real elite goaltenders, the best,
right.
the best five that ever played, they're as reliable as relievers. They drive you nuts. One time, I mean, Doobie single-handedly carried this team to the playoffs one year. And by the time he left, there's get him out of here.
Right.
He terribly gives up more weak goals than anybody. So goaltenders are just, as I once said to Herbie Brooks, who I love to agitate because he loved to agitate me. So it was fine. And I think the first time I saw him after Lake Placid, I patted him on the back and I said, "Man, Herbie, it's amazing what you can do with a hot goalie." And that was not what he was looking for. But anyway, he was, so is the goalie going to, right? That's the one thing you never know. Is the goalie going to be as good next year as he was this
year?
That's
true.
Look at St. Louis. They came up here with this. What was his name? Jake
Allen.
Jake Allen. He was Ken Dryden. And the next year he couldn't stop a volleyball.
Right.
It's the weirdest sport there is.
You're
There's
right.
No doubt about it. It's just random.
Yeah. I had Wes Walls on Friday's show, and he said exactly the same thing. I mean, he played. I mean, he said, now he's an analyst on Bally Sports North. He said, we talked
great,
about. He is great. He is really good. He said, we he said on the broadcast we talk about the power play, we talk about the penalty kill, we talk about all these other things to try to make it sound interesting, but it all comes down to the goaltending. And he's like, it's just true.
That's right. Well, hey, we mentioned Sydney. We ought to mention, you and I were talking about this 9 years ago today. We lost the great Dark Star.
Unbelievable.
One of my favorite human beings that ever lived. Now, he once told a friend of mine that I was the brother he never had. And that really made me emotional until I'm sure that he said that about 30 other people too. So there was always what Dark said. And then what he was working on, was the thing. And my wife had some friends who had a negative opinion of Dark in the media,
Sure.
And the thing that they always said, how can Patrick get along with him so well? He can't. How do you know if he's telling the truth? And as I've always said, what difference does it make? They're great stories. Yeah, he was, man, what a character. He was a beauty. And I miss him every day.
How did you guys get to be such good friends, Patrick, if I might ask? I don't know if I know the origin story of your friendship.
I think, we discovered him on the Monday Night Sports Talk show, right? Because he called in and said Bud was leaving the second time, and we made a big deal out of it. And it turned out to be true. Because he found it out drinking with Mike Lynn's brother at the Lafayette Club bar. Is how he
perfect
information. But then we ran with it. But then he's my kind of guy. He's a guys and dolls guy. He'd be the play or something. He's my kind of guy because he had the irreverent look at life and never took himself terribly seriously and was always up to something. But I don't know. I just love the fact that big Minnesota sports fan, but also a cynic and those kind of guys. And I don't. Plus, I always admired the fact that he was in the car business, but he wanted to become a celebrity. And he made himself one, he turned himself into something out of whole cloth. It was just, he wanted people to know who he was. And he, he managed to pull it off in an unbelievable fashion. And of course, anyone who ever listened to his show knew that you were on eggshells if you were one of his guests wondering what he might ask you.
Yes.
My favorite question ever. And I think this was on a TV thing he was doing. can't remember what it was with Trent Tucker. Have you ever heard this little bit?
I'm not sure.
Tucker, yes. Hey, Trent Tucker, blah, blah, blah. White people, your thoughts.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I don't put somebody on the spot. That's
Tucker's going, what?
What's going on, Dark? Oh man.
Because he never wrote down a note or anything in his
No.
life. It was all off the top of his head. But
Whole life.
he was a beauty. There's no doubt about it. And the day he died, I know that he had two cell phones. He had the one cell phone that he always answered. Then there was the other cell phone, that you really needed to get a hold of him. And I think I got a call from K-Fan. I was doing a show at a golf course, and I got a call from K-Fan saying, "Have you heard from Dark today? He didn't show up, but he always shows up for a noon Friday show or something, Thursday." And I said, "No, let me check." And I called the other phone, the hotline phone, and he didn't answer. And I got nervous. And then I think it was Bobby Hagan and Chad Abbott and somebody else from the station went over to his place and went in there, and they found him. And it was, he hadn't been feeling well for a 3 weeks. And I think he was finally going to go to the doctor, and it didn't make her. So what a beauty, though.
He was a beauty.
Yes.
I went and did a story.
The greatest sporting, he loved the Twins. He loved the 91 World Series. He loved that. But the greatest sports event he ever saw was Greg Gagne putting Bobby Heenan in the weasel suit at Civic Center. That was his all-time favorite sports event, being in the Civic Center the first time they put Heenan in the weasel suit.
That's great.
So, yes.
I didn't know. I knew him about a fraction of what you knew him, but I went and did a story on all the Canterbury crew a while ago.
Oh, yeah.
And he somehow became convinced that he and I were going to go to a Notre Dame football game after 10 minutes of talking, just because neither one of us had ever been. He was like, "We're going to go. We're going to," and he brought it up every single time I saw him after that. I was like, "When are we going to that Notre Dame football game?" I was like, I don't know. I didn't know this. I guess when you say something, you got to follow through with Dark, because he was going to make you, he's going to make you do that.
Yeah. Well, he would have made, he wasn't completely immune to false promises either.
Oh, really? I don't know.
Yeah. So but he was, he'd always come over on Sunday nights when the Sopranos were hot, and we'd go do the TV show, and then he'd drop off 3 big hunks of meat and give them to my wife and say, "We'll be back." And she'd cook them, and then we'd watch the Sopranos. And that was a real tradition. And then he'd stick around for, I think the last time I saw him, I showed him that Funk Brothers thing. Have you ever seen that with them singing the old Funk Brothers song? And it's like a 2-hour documentary. And
I haven't seen it.
He loved that music, the bebop and
sure,
doo-wop and all that stuff. He loved that music. At his funeral, we got him a doo-wop band to come in, and a little doo-wop 3-4 singers to come in and sing that stuff for him. He loved that music. So
nice.
He had unbelievable rock and roll 1960s guy. When it was made, where it was made, who sang it, when it was a hit. He was a rock and roll music savant from the 50s and 60s. It was really the 60s more than any time. He knew everybody. He knew every song from 2 chords. He could have been on Name That Tune. It was unbelievable.
Well, 9 years ago, kind of weird to think that it's been that long, but yeah, definitely. What a character, and all better to have known him at the very least. But definitely, he's an all-timer. He's an all-timer for sure. Well, Patrick, thanks for coming on Tuesday's show today. We'll do this again next week on Monday. I would hope, and have a great rest of your day. All right.
All right. Thanks, Mike.
Let's end with the cooler. Patrick and I didn't get into this, but I think he's writing a column about it for Wednesday's paper. Looking forward to reading it. Naomi Osaka pulls out of the French Open, and this is kind of the continuation of the story all week, where she, citing her anxiety, didn't want to do media events at Roland Garros, and I get that and I respect that. I think people in the sports media, which I am one of them, get a little high and mighty about access and what we do with it. I will say though, the way I've always looked at it is I don't think anybody should be forced to do any sort of media session at any time. But if you're going to do it after a win, you should be prepared to do it after a loss so we can tell a complete story. So that's always been my thing. Make sure you're doing it. If you're going to take the good, you got to have the bad with it. So I'm not saying that pertains specifically to her. That's just my philosophy overall on who should be talking and when they should be talking. If you're going to talk after a win, talk after a loss. Be as accessible as you are comfortable with, but don't expect everything to just be all the good news all the time. That'll do it for today. Like I said, I think Rob Refsnyder will be on Wednesday's show. Plenty of other good stuff coming up later this week. Thanks for joining me here on Daily Delivery on Tuesday. Please download this podcast, write a review, leave a rating if you would. Subscribe to Star Tribune, startribune.com, and we'll catch you on Wednesday.